Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar for today, S'mores by the Dumpster Fire. If This webinar began out of, I've been in this job right around 6 months, and early on, there was a request to an earlier webinar, I think that Shelby had done, but one of our team had done, and it was basically, what do you do when everything sucks? How do you maintain sanity? And I think that's a great question. And it's been one that I've heard from other faculty and staff around the TTUS, the Texas Tech system. And it's one I think that affects all of us. And if you signed up for this and you saw the title, you know the title is actually a little bit longer. It's S'mores by the Dumpster Fire, or How to Maintain Sanity, I think, because I am no expert in this. I am simply a fellow traveler on the road. I'm Brandon Hudson. I'm a training program manager in the Office of Leader and Culture Development for the system. And I have about 20 years of nonprofit work before coming into this role. And I've seen my share of dumpster fires, and my sanity has been stronger at times than others. So I think it's a good topic to address and come back to. And I encourage you, if you have any questions, throw them in the chat or unmute yourself and speak up. I'll be asking a lot of questions. I hope you'll answer in the chat. And then there are a few that I want to make sure you maintain your anonymity. And so there'll be a Slido, including our first one, which is going to be the question of, what is your current dumpster fire? And so if you've never used Slido before, you can scan that QR code and put in your answer, or you can go to the website slido.com and put in that hashtag number there. There is no space when you type that into the Slido. Yeah. Stress over finances. That can be personal or at work, over budgets. I am not surprised by some of these answers. They are what I might have expected. A lot of concern over, hey, I appreciate your honesty and vulnerability. Yeah, raising teenagers. I just spent a week with 6 of them, so I get that. Only 2 of them belong to me. Seriously, I appreciate y'all answering that. Toxic team members, accommodation instead of accountability, concerns about marginalized populations, LGBTQ plus, the way we're seeing federal legislation impacting the work in higher education, letting go or managing perfectionism. I think these are all fantastic, and I am again deeply appreciative of your vulnerability and honesty in that, because I think if we're going to talk about navigating dumpster fires, the first thing is uh, I was on vacation and then some bereavement leave, and somebody asked me what I was working on when I came back to work, and I said, "Oh yeah, I've got this webinar about." I think in my family calendar it just said dumpster fire, and my mother-in-law was like, "What's a dumpster fire?" And I realized that maybe vernacular people are not familiar with. So if you signed up for this, maybe you're just curious about what dumpster fires are. but maybe you know. And it's really just a way of saying not all faculty being motivated, passionate, great. It's a way of saying when the world seems like it's on fire. And I think the first thing we need to do, if we're going to talk about navigating it and making s'mores by it, which is how do we make the best of it without toxic positivity? I think the first thing we need to talk about is we have to name the elephant. And that's why I asked you what your dumpster fire is. Because we do live in a culture that wants us to be falsely positive. And often the elephant that is lighting the dumpster fire will tell us that there is no dumpster fire. Uh, and so I want to say to you, hey, if you feel like you're in the middle of a dumpster fire, good on you for acknowledging it. Good on you for saying this is a dumpster fire. Um, that's valid. That's true. And there are things when we are experiencing dumpster fires that we need to be aware of. It's a fire. It's dangerous. It's a metal box that's hot. It will burn you. It is often releasing noxious, if not toxic, fumes. And it is unhelpful in almost every area of life to live in denial. I'm going to go ahead and say every area. I'm not sure why I put the almost in there. And so you may be in a situation that is saying to you, everything is fine. And everything within you is saying, this is not okay. I feel threatened. I feel insecure. I feel anxious. And it's often things outside your control. So if you don't hear that from anyone else today, allow me to say to you, your dumpster fire matters and it is real. And even if you are the only one in your system who can see it, if you feel like something is wrong, that's valid and true and real. And you need to do what you can to keep yourself safe, to not be burned, and also to recognize the complexity of professional work and life and how sometimes you feel like there's a dumpster fire. Let's acknowledge it. And yet I need to keep my job. I need to stay in this situation for some reason. And so that's the point of the rest of this conversation is when you are in the middle of a dumpster fire, how do we maintain sanity? Anybody got any questions or feedback or thoughts so far? Okay. I want to offer 7 conversation starters. I hope you'll chime in on the chat. These are 7 approaches that I think can be sanity savers in the midst of a dumpster fire. I think the first step we've already talked about is name it, own it. The things we do not name, we cannot deal with. We have to diagnose it. But then sometimes there are things outside our control. And so, how do we approach our role in these systems? And these are the 7 approaches that I think can be helpful. The first is, I think, zoom out. So, one of you said earlier, raising teenagers. I just got back from an unexpectedly long trip. And so I actually found a lot of joy coming into the office today because it was just a change of pace and an environment that is more under control, where I have a little more say. So I was able to zoom out of kind of this tense situation with family into to see a bigger picture. Often when we're at work, we might be so focused on what takes 40 to 60 to 80 hours of our week. We might be so focused on that that we lose sight of the things that are going right. So I think when we zoom out, the questions we need to ask ourselves are, what are some other areas of life that you can focus on when things are bad in one particular area? Does anybody have any examples of how you have done that in the past or how you might could do it now? When something's going wrong, what is something you can look at that's going right? Focus on gratitude daily. Yeah. Hey, that's awesome. Using the app Finch. Each day it reminds me to think about one person who cares for me. Our survival instinct, um, just biologically as a species, is we are eh, wired to focus on what's going wrong because that's what's kept us alive. But we are not in the risk most days of being eaten by saber-toothed tigers. So we have to learn to adapt, to zoom out and focus on what's going on. I love that. Uh, Cup of coffee. Yeah. I love my cup of coffee in the morning. Focus on that. Gratitude is such a big thing. It has such a neurological impact and a psychological impact on how our brains are wired. We can train ourselves, and again, not toxic positivity and not avoidance, but to develop a deeper capacity to notice the good things. Mr. Rogers was not wrong. When things go poorly, find the helpers, find those who care for you, regardless of what kind of work output you are putting out, or regardless of what's going on. So, the very first technique I think that's very helpful is when we get really focused on something that's going wrong, is to zoom out and say, okay, what else is going on? The second technique is the opposite of that, and that's to zoom in. Even in the midst of a dumpster fire, um, there are little things in that space that are going well. So it might be a colleague that you really enjoy, and we'll come to the colleague talk later, but you might find someone in your office who like just gets you and knows the pain that you are in right now, and you might have that cup of coffee together. So we can zoom in into the situation and find those small moments of awe and wonder and joy. Does anyone have any examples of how that might work for you in your current dumpster fire? Kind of my joke about this is if you were looking at a real dumpster on fire, you might see that someone had like put a really sweet piece of graffiti on that dumpster and be able to appreciate the graffiti and the artistry, even in the midst of recognizing that the world is on fire. Oh, I love that. I need to focus on the one faculty member who's super passionate, motivated, and helping me. Absolutely. Even everyone on my team is helpful, so I never feel like struggling alone. Perfect. Yeah, Joseph, we're going to talk about that in a minute. Yeah, sometimes it's okay just to appreciate the fact that you are not alone at the dumpster fire. We're spending too much, but hey, I have an income. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Um, so many of these skills to maintain some hold on sanity overlap. Um, and I think we're going to get to one of my favorite in a little bit, and it is that whole sometimes zooming in involves a lot of humor. So that's good. That's good. I think the third thing we can do is to remember impermanence, which is just a phrase I really love. But one of the things that happens when we are in the middle of some sort of traumatic event, and maybe that word is overused, but at the same time, the pushback against it, what happens to you can be traumatic. And trauma is anything that is too much, too fast, too long, anything that overwhelms who you are. And that can be a car wreck, it can be an illness, it can be a work situation, a family situation. That creates a lot of angst and anxiety within us. And one of the reasons that happens is that people, or at least myself, tend to think of the current crucible, the current crux, the current situation as the way that things will always be. Um, it's not, though. People often use the saying, this too shall pass. Now, they don't say how it will pass. It might pass like a kidney stone, but this too shall pass because that is the nature of time. No situation lasts forever. Fires run out of fuel and eventually burn out. So, with that in mind, what are you already doing, or how can you gain perspective on the situation by remembering it won't last forever? Do any of you have any tips on that? Something that's working for you? Yeah, one day at a time. I remind myself I have so far survived every hard day. Good. Tomorrow is another day. Yeah. Yeah, the issues that, oh, okay. I often, the issues consuming me now and costing me sleep will be forgotten in weeks. Yeah. I always ask myself, is this a hair color decision or a tattoo decision? You change your hair, it isn't forever, but a tattoo is a lifelong decision. Right. Yeah. I mean, perspective matters and in the grand scope of our lives. Um, and again, I just feel the need to reiterate throughout this, none of these techniques or skills are uh, meant to minimize the pain of the dumpster fire or the danger of the dumpster fire. But it is to say that we do need to develop healthy coping mechanisms to try to hold on to who we are, the truth of who we are. And the next one is one of my favorite, and that is humor. It's okay to laugh when things suck. Gratitude for waking up every day. Yeah, a blessing to wake up every morning, no matter what's happening. Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes when people ask me how I am, I say vertical. Not everybody is. And so I can have gratitude for that. I can have gratitude for sore muscles. I can have gratitude for whatever. Uh, I think laughter really is, yeah, thank you, Anita. It is a cute baby. It is not mine. It is the internet's baby. I think one of my favorite pieces of literature is Jonathan Swift's A Modest Proposal. And he was looking at economic inequality. You thought it was me. No, yeah, sure, it was. Let's go with that. Uh, the and in A Modest Proposal, he was looking at all this economic inequality, this great divide. And so he wrote an essay, a facetious satirical essay that the ultimate outcome of the wealth inequality would be that the rich should just eat the poor. It might as well just do that. And it incensed everyone. Everyone was so upset about it. And I think that's so funny, not cannibalism, but the idea that he saw where something was headed. And so he was able to say, look, we gotta get a little silly with this. We have to laugh at this. I am of the right age that I experienced the first wave of the Bob Saget hosted America's Funniest Home Videos. which is where basically we watch someone step on a rake and get hit in sensitive parts of their body by said rake handle, and we laugh, and then someone gets paid for that laughter. Um, Pain, suffering, and humor are interconnected things. And I think we need to remember that just because we laugh about a thing doesn't mean we're not taking it seriously. I love that we can point out the absurdity of things and find humor in it. And it's okay to move pretty rapidly as humans between crying about a thing and laughing about a thing. Do any of you have resonance with that experience? Something being so, it's like watching a movie that's so bad it's good. Wayne's World. Now, are you saying Wayne's World's a bad movie? I think I may have told this story to some of you before. Parks and Rec on repeat. Kevin Hart uses his pain in his comedy. Oh, absolutely. Some of the best comedy comes from people who have experienced deep pain and have turned that into laughter. And I think it's a real skill. I'll be at MSU in September with their Lifelong Learning Center, and the talk I'm giving is on the prophetic voice of comedy, because I think comedy has a role to point out deeply true things, and it that laughter kind of creates a breaking up of the soil of our lives so we can approach things differently. That's also true for the next skill, which is to make meaning. I know in some of his webinars and conversations, Lane Mears has mentioned Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning as a Holocaust survivor, and looking at what made the difference between those who survived even post concentration camp. Frankl taps into the deep human need to make meaning. And sometimes, without saying that, suffering is a necessity for growth, sometimes suffering is an element of growth. And so we can begin to contextualize the dumpster fire, remember that we've survived every hard day, and look to a future where the current crucible has created something within us. We've reflected on it, we've practiced gratitude, and we will emerge more capable than we used to be. I don't love the phrase, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, because I think that is often used by those who are maybe the ones inflicting the pain. But at the same time, there is a beauty to the resilient spirit that can sometimes subversively make meaning and put kind of an Ebenezer, a moment of hindsight to say, well, this is where I decided to do this thing. What doesn't kill you leaves you with unhealthy coping mechanisms. That's correct. I've had a few myself. Bye, Kim. Thanks for being here. Yeah, I think we are people who need to make meaning. Have any of you had anything in your past that maybe helped create not an unhealthy coping mechanism, though let's say there's power in recognizing that you might have a few, that has created a space where you can reflect and see that a a dumpster fire, not just a hard thing, but something that was really a mess, created something in you that you are pleased with now, that you're proud of. Yeah. If you are uncomfortable, you are growing. Potential to learn something from every situation, even if it was a bad situation. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Deep loss can be fertile ground for growth, um, which doesn't diminish the pain at all. Yeah. Developing the ability. Naming the elephant opens up opportunity for support and community. And Kristen, that's a great, sorry, I wanted to make sure that I'm reading your name right. Kristen, that's a great example. Yeah, Wendy, perfect. My chaotic childhood helped you to become a counselor. Yeah, that's powerful. I'm sorry for what you went through as a child, but I am thankful that you have turned that into a space to help others. And Kristen, you bring up a great thing, and I think uh, the next to last skill I would say for maintaining sanity is connection. Um, and I mean that in two ways. The first really is what we're talking about recognizing those who are also sitting around the dumpster fire around you. Um, you know the people you work with. Learning to not take directions from people who don't know where you're going. Yeah, I find that so often people offer advice, and I mean it happens not just at work but among friends and in family. And sometimes we're like, okay, I'm going to take that advice. We live in systems where we feel like we need to. But sometimes if I step back and I go, okay, I'm looking at that person's life, and in the least judgmental way I can, I recognize that they're not living the life I want. So maybe their advice is not the advice I want to take. Um, that's a really helpful way to look at it, which does come back to connection. I had a therapist once who talked about uh, treating our relationships and our emotional bandwidth as a series of concentric circles, like an archery target. And it was one of the most freeing things that seems so uh, duh in retrospect. But what she was saying to me was, you get to pick who goes in your bullseye. You can say, here are the 4 or 5 people whose opinions and thoughts I really value. And then you can choose in those circles that surround it how much input they get. Um, Sometimes, I'm not saying this, Lane, to you. Sometimes they're your supervisor. He's my supervisor. And but you get to navigate the weight that relationships have. Not everybody gets to have the deepest voice in your life. And at the same time, you are not alone in the dumpster fire. If you looked at that very first slide with people naming the elephants that is their dumpster fire right now. So a lot of commonality, a lot of struggle of people together. I'm fascinated by the idea of mirror neurons, that we pick up on the feelings and emotions and things we have a hard time defining from one another. And functional MRIs are teaching us about that. And I'm fascinated by that because it explains so much how when you walk into a room or when you are hanging out with coworkers or when you are around your office mates, you can feel something within you about who will resonate with your pain. And it is back to Mr. Rogers, seek out the helpers, seek out that connection because you are not alone. The other piece of connection is kind of back to naming it and acknowledging it and validating it, which is So often when we are in a dumpster fire, we can get into spirals. And one of the things we need to do is not only connect to others, but connect to ourselves. Do a gratitude journal, take a walk, do some box breathing exercises. Make the connection within yourself between your heart and your emotions and your mind and your body can help to ground you and help us gain that perspective on the dumpster fire. Does anybody have any thoughts here or examples or things that are working for you about connection? Yeah, Joseph, that's true. Very siloed. Its connection can be difficult. Um, that is a reality. Uh, Trying to intentionally think of ways for faculty members to be fully present, connecting and not just working. I've been shocked, hearing from faculty members in different places saying that they feel very alone and thinking in my role and in our office, what role can we play in facilitating connection in an increasingly siloed culture? I think that's really important. Scheduled a phone call with my best friend since you just moved. Yeah, it's a great reset. Reset's a powerful word. Um, Sometimes we just need a reset. Absolutely. That's great. I'm glad that you are tying into these things. Okay, so kind of the last skill that I want to talk about is creativity. And I want to mean a couple of different things here. The first is uh, we're going to talk a lot about this next week's webinar. I think it's next Tuesday, about what happens in your brain when you make art. But I know for me personally, finding a creative outlet makes a big difference in my mental health. And sometimes it is about building kind of a protective sheath around our mental health that we can use when we are in difficult situations day in and day out. So you may not think of yourself as an artist, but you are. There is not a single human who was not born to make some kind of art. And we don't have to limit what that means, but something happens in our brains, um, neurological repair, an increase in neuroplasticity. Things happen when we make art that help us deal with pain. I think spiritual music, and I mean that as the technical category, and the blues are perfect examples of suffering that meets creativity that then becomes meaning making and it creates connection. But it is someone taking something really bad and making some sort of art out of it. What about you? Any of you engage in any sort of art, write poetry, prose, music, paint, color, mandala? Cross stitch and embroidery, quilts, perfect, right? Watercolor. Watercolor is a tricky medium because it's so much like once you put it there, it's there. Play piano and the flute. I hope at the same time, Aaron. I would like to see that. That's awesome. Online play therapy apps. Yeah, into your virtual. Perfect. Perfect. Pottery. That hand body connection. Great. Yeah. Listen to music. And I should say that. Thank you, Haley. And if I'm not pronouncing your name right, correct me. The the neurological benefits of art have been shown to exist whether one is creating or appreciating. And so I think that's absolutely right. One of the other things that happens when we engage in creativity, again, whether we're um, appreciating it or creating it, is that we are developing this neuroplasticity that allows us to see things in a different perspective, to shift. That act of creation, that ability to shift, then can sometimes be taken back into the dumpster fire to help us see a way out. Um, Not always. Sometimes it is just a coping mechanism that is healthier than some. Uh, but it is also a benefit that it can create some new neural pathways that help us think about, oh, maybe I could do this. Uh, I love the band Rage Against the Machine, mostly because I love that there are all these like Ivy League grads who are like, what if we made a really hardcore band? And I like it as the extension, honestly, of kind of the Woody Guthrie, Arlo Guthrie protest movement, because it is this creative expression of frustration and angst that also has a message. And there is something about the power of subversion that can help us surprisingly extinguish the dumpster fire. Let me ask you, let's take a little poll. What sanity saver resonates the most deeply with you? Laugh, yeah, connection. Good. I think the skill there is that none of them are bad. That you know what resonates with you, so that in the midst of your dumpster fire, you can say, hey, I know this is what is an easy thing for me. Because when we're in the midst of suffering, we can turn inward and we can get small, we can get focused, we can spiral. And so to be able to have a go-to that is maybe the lowest threshold for you is important. Uh, to go, hey, I know if I do this, it will help to set the stage for some resilience, some health. I want to say a lot of us are in systems where, somebody has set a dumpster fire and we are living in it. And they may be saying it's not a dumpster fire. And so we're trying to maintain our sanity. But when we think about one of the principles out of our office that you can lead from any chair that you are in, it's important that we develop these connections, these making of meaning, the zoom out, the zoom in. All of these things matter because we are mimetic creatures. We mirror one another, we copy one another. So someone in a system can break a cycle of that spiral by having some sanity savers that we practice and we share. How we respond affects those around us, which is not toxic positivity. It's not to say suck it up. Let's name it. We own it. This is what this is. And also, together we can get through this. And that is a way that we can powerfully lead no matter what our title or position is. Okay, those are the seven sanity savers, but I want to talk about one last thing before we wrap up. And that is the chances where we can change. If you've ever been around anyone in recovery or a 12-step program or good Buddhists, there's a lot of overlap in that. And Buddhism says, desire is the root of all suffering. People in recovery communities start almost every meeting with the Serenity Prayer, which, again, I don't know your religious leanings, and that's not the point of this. It is what that prayer says. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That wisdom is a real key piece of maintaining sanity. There are things that we can control. There are things we can influence. And so we take responsibility for those. We take action on those. The other is this Buddhist idea of radical acceptance, which is the opposite of desire. And radical acceptance says there are things I cannot control. They are so far out of my control that worrying about them is only diminishing my life. And so I think one of the deeply human skills we have to develop is being able to categorize those things. What can I control? What's outside my control? And if it's outside my control, how can I cope with it? What practices can I inhabit? I would wonder in a couple of minutes, are any of you spending time on things that are outside your control that are draining your life and having no impact on the situation? Yeah. Welcome to the club. I mean, I want to normalize that and say it's what we do. I'll also say we don't have to. We can learn to not, or at least not as frequently. And can focus on the things we can control. We all have a limited, finite amount of energy and bandwidth. And we live in a culture that is not only increasingly siloed, yeah, that's right. It's out of control. And I think that is very healthy if it is things that are actually outside of our control. And I'm not saying that about you. I'm just saying I used to hate it when people would say, well, I'm only human. And I'm like, yeah, but you could still do better than that. It's the Maya Angelou quote of do the best you can until you know better and then do that. There is balance in this. We do have things that are outside our control. We get news from across the world, things that I have very little input on who they are going to elect in Maine. And yet, in my news cycle, I find out all sorts of things about candidates running in Maine. We live in a world that draws our attention to things outside our control. So developing the discipline to focus our finite energy on the things we can control, and as best as possible, daily letting go of the things we can't, is one of the ways that we take the dumpster fire and to the best of our ability, we melt some marshmallows. That is kind of our time. And I want to say to you, you do make a difference. You matter. Your situation matters. The dumpster fire you're experiencing is real. It will burn for a while. That's what dumpster fires do. My hope is that we can develop the capacity to bring our marshmallows so that when the fire does burn out, we are still there. Thank you for being a part of this. If there is anything I can do to help you, or you want to chat about this further, let me know. You have my email, and you will get an email with a recording of this and a handout later today or tomorrow. It'll be on our YouTube channel. But look, you don't have to love the fire. But together, I hope we can continue to learn what to do with it. Anybody got any questions? Okay. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate all of you. And if you want to come make some art together, sign up for next week's webinar. Otherwise, we'll see you when you see you. I'll see you when I see you. Thank you so much.